Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Legion Alpha, and we are doing our in-depth, complete overview of the Blood Deathknight, with its Maw of the Damned, raised from the bowels of hell itself, and all that kind of good shit. That is what we're doing today. I am taking this as of the new build deployed today, okay? It is released today. It has many updates and not much in the way of what's going to happen after this. This is the most complete I can give you. Now, I will revisit this towards the end of Legion, but likelihood is, based on what I'm seeing with a lot of the changes that Blizzard are making to the Blood DKs, we're pretty close to how this thing is going to play out on live, and now they've actually started doing some numbers tuning to try and balance everybody. We're actually in that stage, looking at the recent patch notes for the alpha. So, this is going to be pretty close. Okay, not perfect, not exact by any means, but I will come back to it later. We just have a hell of a lot of specs to cover, so we have to do it at some time, so here we are. The Blood Deathknight, what have they changed? Quite a few things. The very basic changes are that Death Strike now costs runic power, it doesn't cost runes, and your rune spenders are going to be Marrow, Rend, and Blood Strike, so that's it. Okay, Blood Boil does not cost a rune. Death and DK does cost a rune, but actually does not for the Blood DKs. Your real spenders are just going to be Marrow, Rend, Blood Strike, and Death Strike. This does mean that even when this is initially launched in Legion Alpha, people are like, this is basically a 2-button spec, and I'll explain why shortly. They haven't really altered from that, if I'm being totally honest. They haven't really changed from that. What they've done is understood, yeah, 2 buttons isn't really very fun. We'll add in other stuff that you press, but it's not actually going to deviate from our initial design idea. So what is that initial design idea? You have ways of generating runic power, okay, which are going to be Marrow, Rend, and Blood Strike. Now, you'll see Blood Strike costs 1 rune and Marrow Rend costs 2, and that means they have different amounts of runic power generation associated to them. The 2 rune one, Marrow Rend, actually does something else. It generates Bone Shield, okay? So Bone Shield charges now stack up to 10, and come from you pressing Marrow Rend, okay? You can see it goes up to 9, and once I hit 10, it sticks on 10. This is your actual main form of mitigation for a Blood DK. It's a flat 20% damage reduction to everything. It also increases your rune regeneration rate by 10%. That's what's going rune regeneration there, so that's your actual regen of here. It regens your rune regeneration rate. So, Blood DKs, as you probably could tell from these bars, which are vastly empty. Now, don't panic, okay? Don't panic that there's a lot of stuff missing. There is some good stuff missing, which I'll talk about later, but generally there's not a great deal here that you're going to cry about in long term. But one of the big things that's missing is like Icebound Fortitude. That's gone. Okay, that's like your shield wall. That's gone. And Blizzard's class fantasy for the Blood DK is that you are the reactive tank. Okay, you are to be taking that damage because you have so much healing to bring it back. That's the way you're supposed to work. Now, obviously, you can probably already think you're doing some little mental gymnastics here, is how does that work really in a world where every other tank actually mitigates a lot? Because, of course, when you think about how hard a boss should hit, you have to bear in mind how much can a tank take. And it wouldn't work that everybody else can have absolutely tremendous damage mitigation, so everybody else does have that. You can get a prop pally up to like 80% if you do some good Shield of Righteous stuff. 80% damage mitigation. How does that work for a Blood DK? So they were like, yeah, we don't really have any mitigation sources at all beyond Blood Shield and, of course, Marrow Rend. And they were like, okay, so we need you to get this flat 20%. So, Bone Shield is something you'll want to keep up a hell of a lot, or pretty much 100% of the time. Letting it fall off means not only do you lose that 20% damage reduction, but you also lose a 10% rune regeneration rate, which is a double failure. So the idea like that they've come up with is that you will want to balance the thoughts of keeping Bone Shield up at Bone Shield charges, and do you want to generate more runic power to put into some more Death Strikes? That's the idea. So Blood Strike generates like more runic power, yeah? As opposed to Marrow Rend. You can see Marrow Rend generates that, but Blood Shield generates more. It costs a rune less, and you can spam it, and you'll get more runic power, which translates into more Death Strikes. That's the basic idea. You sacrifice some runic power to get Bone Shield charges, or you generate more runic power via Blood Strike, and you have to kind of find that balance. That's the general idea going forward. Now, the problem, of course, was that people were like, well, I want something else to do. What about AoE? What about this and that? I will say disease management has been dropped almost entirely. We have an ability called Death's Caress, which applies diseases. However, Blood Boil also applies diseases. I can almost say I barely ever press Death's Caress. Ever. It just doesn't seem worthwhile because, one, Death's Caress costs a rune, which means I'm sacrificing runic power to do that. I mean, it's just nowhere near cool enough. But Blood Shield also applies diseases. Now, Blood Boil, I should say. The interesting thing about Blood Boil, to counter the idea that people only have the, like, 3 buttons to press, they've made Blood Boil a charge system which costs absolutely nothing. So it just goes into your rotation. For all intents and purposes, your rotation, you'll be putting in Blood Boil. Because even if you don't press Blood Boil or you don't need it on a single target, you're just losing out on damage, essentially, right? Because it's just free. It's free damage. It's not a great deal of damage by any means, but it's sat there, it refreshes your diseases. Blood Boil fits that. You'll also notice now that my Death and Decay is lit up. As I said earlier, Death and Decay costs a rune, but it doesn't actually. Crimson Scourge now makes your Death and Decay free. What does this translate into? You never cast Death and Decay without a rune. By spending a rune. You never do that. Because Crimson Scourge procs all the fucking time, and every time this is not lit up, you're just not going to press Death and Decay. Blood Boil easily fills that target. Because Death and Decay doesn't really do that much for you, okay? It deals shadow damage. Your Blood Strike will hit all nearby enemies, which is a nice AoE damage boost. Tanking-wise, not a big deal. But there you go, Crimson Scourge procs. That is the only time you're going to press Death and Decay. That does mean that a lot of rune management has also been stripped from the Blood DK. In terms of any long-term Blood DKs will know that, like, even in a 5-man, you're going to be doing your balls to the wall damage, but then you can see your next pack coming. You're going to be preparing for that cooldown on Death and Decay. You're going to be preparing for the runes to do some Blood Boils. You're going to be building up so that you can move into that next pack swiftly and efficiently. You're not going to be doing that anymore. That's gone. It's simply a case of Blood Boil is free. It regenerates really, really fast. So you can kind of spam. Look how fast this thing regenerates. It's literally a fucking 6-second recharge. You're not going to be building that. Death and Decay procs all the time, and it's only got a 15-second cooldown anyway as of today's build, which means that kind of thought process is pretty much out of the window, in all honesty, and it doesn't really add anything to tanking regardless. It just allows you to get that aggro, okay? So that's what's going on there. Now, we have some talents and stuff which back this up, but let me just finish here on saying the artifact ability. This was changed again today, which is consumption. This is what your Maw of the Damned will give you. Now, previously, I was blown away by consumption, because it essentially was a lay on hands. It really was. I got completely from 10% to full health, especially on some of the hard-hitting bosses, and we'll talk about the Shanox effect shortly as well. This thing has been changed today, that instead of being based on the damage you took over an extended period of time, right, it's now just based on the damage that it does. So it deals 60,000 physical damage and heals you for 200% of that damage dealt, which means its power and its effectiveness has been significantly weakened. Instead of being like an oh shit button, this thing has a 45-second cooldown, by the way, an oh shit button like, oh my god, I am buried, Death Strike's just not going to get the job done, boom, consumption. That got you basically back to full health, and it was a really meaty, heavy cooldown. Not anymore. I mean, it's not bad by any means, but it's nowhere near what it was. I mean, I'm already at 600,000 health here, and it's dealing, you know, it's dealing like 120 crits or whatever. So that's what you need to bear in mind, is that that's how that works now, and it's a kind of less effective cooldown than it previously was. I liked the previous incarnation. I've done a dungeon this morning on it. It was way less effective, but not terrible. But it's okay. It's okay. On top of that, what other cooldowns do we come with? Baseline. You still have Death Grip. You still have Taunt. You still have Gorfied's Grasp, which is on the most obnoxious 3 minutes cooldown ever. They hate this ability. They really hate it, or they want it to be more emphasized onto the Demon Hunter that also gets Gorfied's Grasp. I don't get it, what the problem with this is. This is one of the most useful, amazing PvE abilities that DKs would bring into the table, and they've made it a 3 minute cooldown, which is just fucking irritating. It's so irritating that it's on such a low cooldown. Now, you can shorten that cooldown with talents, but nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. And it bugs the fuck out of me that they've done this. We can still res people. We still have Path of Frost. Now, noticeable things that are missing here from a tanking perspective before I get to the final cooldowns then. Chains of Ice is gone. I really detest that. Now, it's, as you'll probably say, well, in a raid environment, Preacher, which is what we focus on here. We focus on the raid environment. Losing Chains of Ice ain't that big of a deal. However, when I'm doing 5-man heroics and challenge modes and stuff, one thing I absolutely love to do as a tank is Chains of Ice that last target, slow the fuck out of it, get moving, and get on to the next pack. Now, people did respond and say, where's Chains of Ice? It's so useful. I want that. Especially when kiting and stuff. Chains of Ice, a ranged snare, is really good. So what they said is they've compromised, and what they've done is give Blood Strike 30% movement speed reduction when you use it. So you have a snare now built into Blood Strike. It's just nowhere near as good. It needed the range. I really miss it. On top of that, what else is noticeable by its absence? Strangulate. That extra interrupt is so goddamn useful as a tank. especially a good tank who is doing maybe some pugs and stuff, you can't rely on your DPSs to deal with things, or in fact having that extra interrupt to cope with when things go wrong. You can think all the way back to Omnitron Defense System, to something as new as Orgorgia, or whatever it is, and you will know that having somebody who can have that extra interrupt that isn't a mage who can't give a shit, or won't give a shit, or a fucking boomkin who just won't give a shit because I'm casting Lunar Strike, lol, and being the guy who can say, I have that backup interrupts, especially when you're doing small form content like a challenge mode or whatever, being able to say, yeah, I can be part of the interrupt rotation because I have Mind Freeze, and having the emergency backup button in the form of Strangulate is really useful. It's also really useful for a tank to gathering the Death Ball. The Death Ball is something I've taught you guys about so many times. You want the Death Ball. That means all the mobs in a nice sturdy pack. You're getting all the DPS to be able to cleave them effectively, but there's a lot of things in Legion that involve moving around, right? Particularly if you look at Blackrock Hold, where odds are there's lots of casters in packs. You can use your Death Grip, you can interrupt one and form the first Death Ball, but then you move, and you can maybe use Gorfine's Grasp for a 3-minute cooldown, but you'll have to move again pretty soon because they're filling the floor with obnoxious crap, and so the casters are all over the place. And Strangulate almost filled that gap as a ranged interrupt. It's really sad to see that Strangulate was removed and gone. What do we have then? We still have Dancing Rune Weapon, which is... it's very strange. It's very, very strange. But it mirrors your melee attacks and bolsters your defenses. In terms of what the other tanks have in terms of like a semi-DPS tanking cooldown, Dancing Rune Weapon is feeling so antiquated. It doesn't look as cool as I would like, and it's a 3-minute cooldown for 40% parry. That's very heavy. We can look at the Guardian Druids and just see the amount and the abundance of really interesting short cooldowns they have. I'm not saying I like that system. A balance should be found, but this feels really old school at this point, and it feels like it could do with some buffing, or even just a graphical boost would be nice. But to bring it on par, I'm not saying it needs buffing particularly, but it could do with bringing on par with what the other tanks have in a similar vein. Well, Vampiric Blood is our main cooldown now, a 1.5-minute cooldown. You embrace your undeath, increasing your maximum health by 30% and increasing all healing received by 30%. So it's best of both worlds considering the old glyph stuff that's going on there. But that is what it does. No damage mitigation at all built into that. So you can kind of see what I'm saying with like flat damage mitigation. It's kind of missing a little bit in comparison to the other tanks. I want to make that clear. It's in comparison to the other tanks because of the flavor of the Blood DK being reactive. We also have Anti-Magic Shell still doing its job. But other than that, that is your baseline stuff. That is what you're going to get as a baseline toolkit. And then we'll get into the talents and how you actually modify that stuff, okay? I want to point out movement speed and mobility. Big complaint of the Blood DKs was the mobility. Their solution to that has been, Death's Advance was always shit. We know that, right? Death's Advance was always fucking shite. But their answer to that is Wraithwalk, a channeled ability. Okay? I'm going to show you the animation, although it is going to be changed. Whee! Looks very cool, right? It actually looks quite cool. It's going to be changed in some way. Now, you can't jump, which means you get stuck on stuff all the fucking time. I Wraithwalked going up some stairs, and it didn't work. And I was like, wow. Wow. Because it's kind of like Levitate in that respect. You know, it has all the same problems that Levitate has. And as I was moving up some stairs or over a ledge, it just stopped me. And I was like, motherfucker, because you can't jump while you're in Wraithwalk. It's a 1-minute cooldown, though, so bear that in mind. You get a 70% movement speed for just 3 seconds every minute. But it does break movement impairing effects, which is quite nice. So if you do get snared or whatever, which does happen quite regularly in Legion, you can get out of it with a 1-minute cooldown. Is it Blessing of Freedom? No. Is it Charge or Heroic Leap? No. Is it as cool as Divine Steed? No. Is it Roll? No. But it is there. Say what you will, like it or not, that is what they've given you. They could have come up with something. I like the idea of the Wraith Walk, and it almost feels like if you're going to introduce the Wraith thing, they could have really expanded on that and come up with some interesting spells that were unique to the Blood DK based around being like a Blood Wraith. I would have liked that. Blood Wraith form itself would have been an interesting addition to the toolkit. So let's get into the talents then and understand some things that are going on here. So in the bottom tier, you kind of have like a newbie spell, a less interesting than it should be spell, and a spell that doesn't quite fit. Okay, so this is, again, it's not me whining, this is just how it is. So we have Bloodworms. Now, the idea of the Bloodworms in Legion is that if you Death Strike while you're going to overheal, then you will spawn bloodworms. They will like go, oh, how much did you overheal? Cool. We're now a bloodworm that has that amount of healing in it, okay? Bloodworms deal minor damage. They'll do some nibbling at the target then for 6 seconds, then they will burst and heal you for what you overhealed. Now, this is kind of interesting in 5-mans that are any easy content, yeah? Any really, really easy content, because you have to overheal with Death Strike to make bloodworms work. If you're in an environment where you're not going to get overhealed that much, bloodworms instantaneously become fucking useless. instantaneously. Now, you can do some abuse with them. If you see, the next part of the tooltip is if you drop below 30% health, your bloodworms will immediately burst, which means if you know, let's say, a dragon is about to breathe on you for lol amounts of damage, you don't have an anti-magic shell, or whatever the case might be, you can chain a couple of death strikes into the target and build some bloodworms that'll instantly heal you after that. There is that ability to do that, which kind of ties into how a lot of players were using Purgatory, which is using it as a defensive cooldown. You can do that with bloodworms. However, overall, it's not incredible, but it's okay. It's nice to see the bloodworms there. I would like to see, I think a nice fix for this would actually be bloodworms always spawn at a percentage of the death strike. So you always have that kind of buffer zone if you take bloodworms. Most people read this as it's like people who don't know how to use death strike effectively are getting some sort of like, it's okay, don't worry about it type ability, yeah? If you're not death striking properly, it's alright. It's alright because bloodworms will carry you. Heart Strike. Everyone was so excited to see Heart Strike return. The classic, the cleave ability. You instantly strike the target and 2 other nearby enemies, causing some physical damage, reducing their movement speed by 2% for 8 seconds. It does replace Blood Strike, which is 30%, so I assume that's a tooltip error for now. Generates 5 bonus runic power plus 2 runic power per additional enemy struck. So it's kind of like if you're AoEing or cleaving, you'll get more runic power. I've got to be honest with you. The amount of runic power this thing generates, even in an AoE environment, is so small. I think the math is about every minute you gain 1 extra death strike. That aspect of it, which I thought was going to be really interesting, which is like, oh, it makes sense. If I talk to you about a classical tanking idea, it's that if I'm fighting a lot of targets, like a lot of small, not hard-hitting targets, their idea is that they'll chew through Bone Shield really quickly, which makes marrow rend less interesting, right? And if you watch the initial artifact quest that I did with the Blood DK, that's what I thought the idea was here. Now, it doesn't quite work out that way, okay? It doesn't quite work out that way. Hard Strike seems to have been built on the premise that I originally thought it would work. It's like, oh, when you're dealing with a lot of small mobs or a big pack, then using 2 runes on Marrow Rend isn't that great because they're going to chew through the Bone Shield too quickly. So the replacement for that would be Heart Strike, which gives you many more Death Strikes to deal with. Yeah? Now, unfortunately, the actual realistic thing is that it doesn't really work out that way. Bone Shields just aren't consumed that quickly in most cases. You can keep Bone Shield up for a very, 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 very long time, even when you're AoE tanking. And Heart Strike just doesn't deal enough bonus runic power to make a huge amount of difference, although I use it for basically in a 5-man for the damage purposes, right? But that's a numbers thing. And the changes today have also altered how much runic you get, how much, you know, rune regens and all that kind of stuff. That's a numbers thing. I believe that is the intention of Heart Strike, and I would be more than happy to see that become a part of it. It's just not quite there yet in Legion. Our final choice then is Consume Vitality. So this is a channeled spell. It's going to cost you 2 runes, so you're going to sacrifice either 2 blood strikes or a marrow rend for this. And it drains health from the target over 5 seconds, but you can still move, parry, dodge, and while channeling this ability, similar to how Blade Storm works, yeah? You can still do your natural avoidance while under the effects of Consumed Vitality. It looks like this. It sounds gross. It looks very cool. It looks very, very cool. Any problems with it? It's a 30-second cooldown. It lasts too long. Why? We have so many extra things to manage that just go free. Like Death and Decay in a single target is way worth. Yeah, it's worth it to cast that. It's going to be proccing all the time. Your runes regenerate really fucking quickly. Like if I do a normal rotation here, where I'm getting my Bone Shields up, and I'm fitting in Blood Strikes as well. You can see a Bone Shield, Blood Striking. You can already see, and then I'm Death Striking in between there. Our rotation is pretty fucking full, honestly. It's really full, and it's very, very tight as it is right now. And there you go, Death and Decay procs, and then you keep going. What you're obviously not seeing is that it's slow. Blood Decay is not slow at all. There's not a 5-second window that I have to use Consume Vitality effectively, like without wasting some resources, which is never nice as a tank. Am I wasting Death Strikes here to do this? Am I wasting Bone Shield generation to do this? Am I wasting Runic generation to do this? All these questions have to come in when you're dealing with something like Consume Vitality, and at the moment there is no window to really fit this in that feels like you're not wasting something. So that's something that could be either quicker. Yeah, it could be quicker, or it could proc to be quicker, or it could be more effective in terms of what it actually does, so it's worth sacrificing stuff. Maybe some damage mitigation while it's flowing in instead of just a straight up heal. That would be nice. They could just rework this a little bit so that 5 seconds either gets reduced to a shorter channel time, costs 1 rune, so it's 2 seconds but 1 rune. Right, and it's a little short-term heal, which I actually think would be kind of weak sauce overall. Or they could just make it do something so it's like, I'm wasting something here, but it's clearly worthwhile. And that would be okay as well. So at level 57, you get some abilities that don't make sense in the current iteration of Legion, but that doesn't mean they won't make sense in the future. So you get Ossuary is the one I want to start in first. Standing your Death and Decay causes marrow rend to hit all other nearby enemies. Now, ultimately, this isn't worthwhile. If marrow rend hits at least 2 targets, an additional 1 bone shield charge have a chance to be generated. A chance, okay? It's additional bone shield charges, so you're not guaranteed them by any means. This kind of means that the 2 runes you're spending on marrow rend while AoEing are not worth it because of the reasons I spoke about earlier. With like AoEing and stuff, the bone shield charges can get chewed up really quickly, and it's just like, bone shield's not hard to generate through other runes. It just doesn't seem to fit right now, Ossuary, if I'm being honest with you, and it could do with doing something more interesting. As Bloodstrike already gets the benefit of being inside Death and Decay, then that would be beneficial. But as it is, it's not really worthwhile. It's not really worthwhile at all. If Ossuary did something like using Blood Shield while Blood Shield while within a Death and Decay would also generate Bone Shield, that could be interesting. Yeah, if it didn't tie it to the rune spend of marrow rend, which is at the moment just isn't really worthwhile, then it would kind of make more sense. Rapid decomposition then. Your Death and Decay deals 25% more damage. As you've probably seen, Death and Decay is down pretty much 100% of the time. Because of the great chance of Crimson Scourge, you're going to be casting it every 15 seconds-ish, because obviously it doesn't proc exactly as you want. What tends to happen, in fact, and maybe I can show you this, is that it procs. It'll proc while it's actually still going. So you can see this proc continues. I still have the Crimson Scourge buff, despite the fact that I've spent it. So what you'll often find is that buff runs out just as Death and Decay comes back off cooldown, and you kind of have to wait for the next one, but you'll see how quickly it procs. So you have a pretty much 100% downtime on Death and Decay. Your Death and Decay deals 25% more damage to targets infected by Blood Plague, which is, honestly, because Blood Boil's free, how can you not have them infected by Blood Plague? It'd be, like, impossible to do that. So it's just a flat damage buff, and generates 1 runic power when it deals damage. And it's 1 runic power. Again, it's just not worthwhile at that point. It's so little. It's so little that it adds up to fuck all over the course of a fight. I'm sure, like, some people will be like, yeah, but more is more, right? Yeah, but it's so little more that it barely seems to fit into the... Tanking's not smooth over the course of an entire fight, and I wish people would really understand that. Tanking isn't just like, okay, you're going to take 20 damage per second or whatever the fuck over the next 10 minutes. That's how this fight works. Tanking just doesn't work like that. So this sort of smoothing out doesn't pay off. Soul Gorge then, it's a spell you can actually use, but it replaces Blood Boil. Didn't add anything to the bars or fill this out for more utility whatsoever. It consumes your blood plagues within 30 yards, dealing shadow damage to each infected enemy and empowering you for up to 24 seconds with up to 15% rune regeneration per plague. Plagues closer to expiration grant more rune regeneration. It's kind of like Plague Leech. You know what I mean? That's the kind of feeling. It's your single target ability for sure that you're going to be taking. I should have got out of combat there. It's kind of like a reworked Plague Leech, which should benefit more from single target. As you can see, both of Ossuary and Rapid Decomposition seem to benefit the fact that you're AoEing. These are both like AoEing things. I wish they would really reinforce the idea instead of having sort of 2 kinds of choices for that. Soul Gorge is more your single target, but does it pay off? You're not going to be spending runes spreading diseases and stuff. So Soul Gorge kind of becomes Plague Leech. Yeah. So you're going to be monitoring Blood Plague while you're doing your rotation, kind of keeping things under control for this point. And it does drop out a piece of your rotation. You're not going to be using Blood Boil like you ordinarily would. And then you're going to go, oh shit, my Blood Plague's about to run out. I'll Soul Gorge it and then reapply it. And then I get this 10 stack regeneration rate increased by 10%. And it's your single target ability. Is it interesting? Sure, it's okay. It's okay. Just drop out the fact it slows the rotation down tremendously because you don't have all them Blood Boils to do. But it is something to manage. And as the only single target choice, sure. Is it fun? Nah, debatable. I'm not going to go into that. So, Spectral Deflection at the next one. While Dancing Rune Weapon is active, attacks cannot damage you for more than 30% of your maximum health. So, this is what I was saying. Dancing Rune Weapons then double dips into being the mitigation ability. Could it have been Vampiric Blood? Maybe? Vampiric Blood's already too powerful? Yeah. Hard to say. Hard to say. I would have liked Spectral Deflection to have been its own ability. Now, I having said that, there are abilities down here which do add cooldowns to your bars. But Spectral Deflection is kind of okay. It makes Dancing Rune Weapon more interesting, but could it have reduced the cooldown of Dancing Rune Weapon a little bit? I mean, 3 minutes to get a double dip effect. I'm already gaining 40% parry. And this kind of like makes up for that, which makes it kind of weak sauce. You get anti-magic barrier. Anti-magic shell also increases your maximum health, so it's not actually anti-magic barrier. I'm sure this will get a rename at some point. Anti-magic shell also increases your maximum health by 25%. Again, these are all kind of ideas, and you're seeing a lot of things that increase your health, and we're going to see even more of them as we move through the tree. This is kind of the counter to the fact that you don't have great mitigation tools. Yeah, you're a reactive tank. So having more health kind of counters the fact that you do that, okay? Ooh, roll the bones. Looks got 6, that got reworked today, so it has 6 bones. It actually looks quite cool. And then I found out what is Red Thirst. Vampiric Blood instantly energizes 1 rune and increases your runic power regeneration by 10% for its duration. Now, the bit that I was interested in is because I'm using Rune Tap, which is a massively contradictory talent, and we'll get there in a sec. But either or, these aren't mega interesting, right? They're not mega interesting, but they're okay. They kind of do the job. They could certainly have something put into them that was slightly more interesting and add some level of complexity to this rotation. That it's not just 2 or 3 buttons, if you want to say that, and the other stuff is kind of damage filler. Which is reasonably what we actually have right now. Is all the other buttons that we press, although it's a very busy rotation, it is a very busy spec and a busy rotation, is that a lot of the stuff that you're busy pressing is actually just straight up extra little damage buffs. And if you miss them, it's not the end of the world, right? You don't have to keep them on cooldown. You don't have to prioritize Blood Boil as long as you're, keeping up your disease or whatever. So, we get Purgatory, still around, which is probably going to go to, although Mark of Blood is actually quite cool. It places a mark of blood on the enemy. The enemy's damaging attacks will also heal their victim for 4% of their maximum health, doubled if the caster is the victim. So it's not mitigation. You can use this to help your tanking partner. Again, it's a 3-minute cooldown. Good God. All these 3-minute cooldowns, which then bear the question for most tanks is, when do I actually press this? Because 3 minutes is a really long time, so I don't want to waste it. I'm going to have to practice this fight to see when I can fit this in. But instead, it's healing you. Okay, so you'll get hit really hard, but it'll heal you for 8% of your maximum health every time that happens. So it's an interesting ability, and again, it does add a cooldown to the bar. You can see I've been playing around with it. I have it on my bars. I've been practicing with it. It's okay. It has its place. Rune Tap then. So what you've probably been able to tell is this spec is not designed whatsoever with one of the classic Blood DK niches, and that is keeping runes in store, banking runes for certain situations. Something if you go back to a lot of the guides I did, particularly over Kata and Mr. Pandaria, you'll see that I was very, very heavy on, you must bank X amounts of runes. You want to bank a blood rune. You want to manage your blood rune so 1 is always regenerating, but you always have 1 in lieu. But obviously we don't even have blood and holy or frost runes anymore. We just have death runes. So that's gone completely. This is what I'm saying. Rune management from what we classically know of the Blood Decay is completely gone now, essentially. It's been completely lost. So that mechanic that we would have had where we'd have 1 blood rune in lieu, and so sat there banked and ready to go, and then we would manage our runes so that we always have 1 regenerating. That's kind of gone. But Rune Tap kind of brings that back in some respects. So the whole spec currently, in its overall design, besides this one talent, is about not banking runes at all. You don't really want to do that. There's always something to do with your runes. Rune Tap setups. Well, what you can do is you consume a rune to restore 20% of your health. You may recast Rune Tap within 3 seconds without triggering the full cooldown. Now, I've taken this. Why? I'm doing 5-answer stuff right now. I can't really do raid testing on my Blood DK, which means Mark of Blood is a 3-minute cooldown I generally don't need outside of the 3rd boss in Blackrock Hold, but I'll talk about that shortly. So Rune Tap kind of fits in better. I'm not going to die because Purgatory doesn't really see a place in there, honestly. I'm in an environment where my Bone Shield is almost never consumed, ever. I mean, I'm at the point now where my Bone Shield charges from marrow rend are naturally expiring due to their... Can you give me the charges? Thank you. And naturally expiring due to their 30-second duration rather than them actually being consumed, which changes the whole game completely. So Rune Tap is something for me to do. And in fact, I had nothing to put on my spell bar number 1, which used to be Icy Touch. And as that's now gone, sure, Rune Tap fit the mold for me, and therefore that fits in with Red Thirst, because I'm generating a rune, which means if I do sort of stupidly play the spec as it's kind of intended to, and use all my runes, when I Vampiric Blood, I can Vampiric Blood, healing received by 30%, and Rune Tap off the back of it, because it energized the rune, right? So you get the idea that I went for there. Now, level 75, we have one of the most overpowered abilities I've ever seen. Tremble before me. How this is going to play out in the challenge mode system, I don't know. Because, honestly, this thing is fucking crazy. Absolutely crazy. What does it do? Enemies damaged by death and decay have a chance to cower in place for 3 seconds, but cannot suffer from this effect more than once per 10 seconds. What does this mean? I've been able to do some enormous pulls with the Blood DK, and it's been fine. Why? Tremble before me. It might not sound that powerful, but fucking hell, this thing procs all the time, which means that if I have a Death and Decay down, which is near 100% of the time for the reasons I've already explained, Tremble before me means that it doesn't matter how many mobs I'm fighting, something in there, or multiple things, are going to be CC'd regularly for like 3 seconds, and it's nuts. And hopefully in the dungeon I'll show you at the end, as long as you don't want to avoid spoilers, you will see that effect happening. You will see that effect happening all the time. How that's going to pay off in challenge modes, I don't know. But I've certainly been able to... It's so much better than something like Shockwave. Because Shockwave stops everything, which means you have this window where you don't take any damage, which is nice in some occasions. But then they all reactivate at the same time, which means you suddenly get hit by everything, right? Tremble Before Me spaces it out evenly. It's like evenly CCing various mobs. And sometimes you'll have mobs that are more regular. I should say, instead of sometimes, like regularly, you'll have mobs that are casting something super dangerous and nobody's interrupting it or stunning it, and suddenly Tremble Before Me just stops it. And it stops it pretty regularly, as mobs last more than 10 seconds in nearly all occasions, particularly in the heroics. So, yeah, Tremble Before Me is very, very interesting. I'll have to wait and see whether this thing gets nerfed a lot to cope with the fact that it's really powerful with the big giant pulls and mitigating the damage those big giant pulls do in comparison to the other tanks. Imagine that, becoming immune to root snares and stuns for 6 seconds does not remove existing effects. What? Get lost. You just give us Wraith Walk, which does that, like, baked in. So what the fuck is March of the Damned all around? What? I mean, immune to stuns for 6 seconds is kind of nice, I guess, but it's so niche. But niche talents aren't the end of the world. It could just be more interesting compared to, like, half of its effect is baked into Wraith Walk anyway. Tightening Grass, though, reduced the cooldown of Scorpius Grass by 60 seconds. Just fuck off, dude. Put this back to what it was already done. It's such a cool and iconic, at this point, ability of the Blood DK that it's mandatory in so many occasions because it's so good. It's a wonderful ability. So stop making it less effective. Please. Please, 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 rethink this. Let's go into our level 90 ones then. Our Foul Bulwark. Every charge of Bone Shield increases your maximum health by 3%. Overall, this isn't a great talent. But the fact of the matter is, as I just explained, is that my Bone Shield is running out in a lot of occasions due to duration, not the amount of charges, which means I get a lot of benefit from this. So thereby, it works for me right now. Long term, not really. Exhume, gain a charge of Bone Shield every 1 second for 5 seconds. Again, Bone Shield's so easy to keep up and maintain. This makes very little sense. Will of the Necropolis, reduce all damage. This is what I would probably go to in this current environment should this go live. I'd probably take Will of the Necropolis. Reduce all damage taken by 20% while your health is below 35%, or any attack that would reduce you below 35%. So if you are going to get hit by that super scary thing, Will of the Necropolis will kick in and prevent that from really, really hurting you, or put a flat 20% damage on top of the 20% from the Bone Shield that you should probably have up anyway. Level 100 then. We gain a 5-minute cooldown. These big, heavy cooldowns for Blood DK. My god. It calls for the pair of Blood Beasts to assist you in combat for 15 seconds. Blood Beasts heal you and themselves for 50% of all damage they deal and share 10% of all damage they take. Now, because it is the reactive tank, as so many things have been done to make it a reactive tank, I believe the 5-minute cooldown is because this does have actually mitigation into it. And off they go. They look cool. They're the Blood Beasts that you all know and love. You'll have seen them for a long time. Since Sourfang, I believe, it's the first time we really saw effective use of Blood Beasts in ICC. They're awesome. They do their job. They don't heal for a tremendous amount, but it's there. And the big effect of them, of course, is the damage mitigation they provide. 5 minutes, though, is fucking heavy, dude. Oh, my God. 5 minutes? That's a long time. That's a long, long time for that cooldown. It really devalues it. A 5-minute cooldown that only lasts for 15 seconds. Woo! Reduce the cooldown, reduce the duration. What's wrong with that? Let's do something like that. Because it's a cool ability. I like the graphic animation. I love seeing it happen. I would just really, really enjoy it not being that way. But you can also have... Oh, I can't change the blood mirror for you, unfortunate. Afflicts an enemy with the blood mirror. So, you'll know this again from ICC. For 10 seconds. 20% of the damage dealt to you is redirected to the target. This is so much more effective than Blood Beasts. Like, so much more effective, and a 2-minute cooldown, which makes Blood Beasts just feel a little wonky and out of place right now, and need a little bit of a reevaluation in my mind. So Blood Mirror is a 20% mitigation. So 20% of the damage dealt to you, so you get hit really hard, is put back onto the target for 10 seconds, right? It's a cool ability. It's great. For single target, Blood Mirror is obviously your go-to ability. And if you've got a single target, you get Bone Storm, but it should be changed to Bloodstorm. It should be changed to Bloodstorm. I can't actually spec it right now. But essentially, it's Rushing Jade Wind or the new Blade Storm animation, if you've seen that on any of my other videos, but a blood effect. So what does it do? It's basically Rushing Jade Wind. Okay, it costs 2 runes, it does AoE damage, and it heals you for 1% of your max health every time it deals damage, so it's better the more targets it hits. It does reasonable damage, it's your go-to AoE spell, and if you should pull too many, like I've been saying, you've got Tremble Before Me, and you've got Bone Storm to sort of mitigate all that, and makes them super powerful in 5-man. The Blood DK is one of the most super powerful 5-man specs I've played in terms of the tanking. They're really, really effective. Now, where are they ineffective then? So that's everything that you're going to get to play with your Blood DK. I can't see them adding too much to it, so you should be pretty clear on that. What's the downfall of it? The Shannox effect is still in action. What's the Shannox effect, for those of you who don't know what that means? Because they are the reactive tank, okay, that is their design, what you have is these awkward moments where they become really ineffective very quickly and can die super, super fast. That tends to happen with any boss that hits reasonably quickly and hits very, very hard at the same time. Okay? Now, there have always been ways to try and counter that, especially if you think about Sharafir, that you could build up before he did his 3 swings in one go type of effect. You could build up to that and prepare for it by preparing a solid blood shield and all that kind of stuff, and maybe a rune tap to go along with it when rune tap was more damage mitigation. Now, can't do that in Legion, which means I've seen heavy return of the Shannox effect, which is just sometimes blood DKs just feel like paper. Not only that, they feel like paper in some scenarios, but they feel invincible in other scenarios, rather than it being a relatively smooth experience that you'll get from probably a prot paladin or a warrior. We don't have Brewmaster right now, so I can't really speak of them. What happens is, and the boss in Blackrock Hold was definitive of this happening. So the boss in Blackrock Hold has a mechanic, spoilers by the way, I'm going to go into the dungeon after this, so if you want to leave now, you generally know how it plays, but I think this is important. The boss, I forget his name right now, has a mechanic where he has a rage bar that fills, and that rage bar fills quicker based on the mitigation, or based on the lack of mitigation that the tank does. Okay, so having Bone Shield up is obviously a must in that scenario. That's your only mitigation. But it does mean that, generally speaking, compared to the other tanks, that the bar fills faster for Deathknights than it does for other tanks. That increases, once this bar is full, he then gains a damage increasing ability, which means he starts to hit harder, and you run into this real trap where you can't prevent his bar from filling quicker, and he's hitting you harder at the same time, and you very, very quickly run into a scenario where he's hitting you so hard and so quickly that you need to be death striking more, but you also need to keep Bone Shield up, but he's chewing through Bone Shield charges, and you run into this really awkward moment where you're just getting crushed, and there's nothing you can do about it. Absolutely nothing you can do about it, where the other tanks just don't have that problem. I have been on a weak DPS group doing Blackrock Hold Heroic, where the tank, which was a prot paladin and the demon hunter, just flat out didn't give a shit about that boss. They were just more than fine with dealing with it, and then I've healed and played a Blood Deathknight in there where I've been smashed and the Blood DK has been smashed, and there's just nothing I can do about it either. It's just the design of the Blood DK causes that issue. Will that have an effective raid? Potentially, and the answer is probably, because it's the only tank that really works in this manner, which means all the other tanks are fine with it, and Blizzard will be like, well, you can have another tank in there. You just need to be aware that if you're going to roll a Blood DK in Legion, that Shannox effect could happen to you, and there's a chance that you'll become the unfavorable tank because of that. And you need to be aware of that. But at the opposite flip end of that, so you don't feel sour and like, well, I'm not going to roll a Blood DK then. The opposite end of that is you feel extremely, extremely powerful regularly outside of that environment. I mean, pretty much invincible. You feel invincible. If you can keep your Bone Shield charges just lasting forever, which some of the artifact abilities really encourage that. I'm not going into them too much because only really consumption is your use ability. But you have things like, where is it? Rattling Bones, where marrow rend generates additional Bone Shield charges. You have the chance, one of these is a chance to get Bone Shield now has a chance equals your critical chance to prevent 35% damage, which is nice. There's a proc chance on actually generating Bone Shields here somewhere, if I can remember what it is. It's around here somewhere, I know it is. Anyway, you can proc. You should know you can generate Bone Shield charges, and they just last a really long time. I can't actually see it right now. It's potentially that's been removed. Bone Shield has a chance to crit. Either or, the message I could come to you, even if they've removed that, is Bone Shield lasts a pretty long time. So you have Rattling Bones. They've changed Unending Thirst, by the way, for those of you who've seen previous builds of Bloodthirst, the Blood DK. Is that Blood Shield now gives you 25% leech. So what you'll have is the big heal for Blood Shield, and then a kind of a drippy sort of heal to come after as a kind of wussier heal to come along with that. And it does seem like the proc chance has been removed. Otherwise, I'm missing it. It's entirely possible. But either way, the message still stands that Bone Shield either lasts a really long time or it doesn't. And that's the be-all and end-all of the entire story. Sometimes it lasts a long time, sometimes it doesn't. Either or, if it lasts a long time, you feel super powerful because you're able to generate so much more runic power quite freely. Spend that on death strikes, which means it goes hand in hand with being powerful. If your bone shields are getting chewed up, you become into this awkward scenario where you're trying to marrow rend, which is consuming double the amount of runes because you absolutely need that 20% mitigation because you're being hit so fucking hard that being hit without the 20% mitigation is just not a choice. And you're doing less death strikes, so it really starts to become detrimental at that point. It's a numbers tweaking. They can do something with that to make it work, but just be aware as of right now, that is a thing. We'll get into some gameplay now so you can see all this in action. Thank you for listening, guys. I hope you found that interesting. Let's continue on. For those of you who are not staying for the spoilers, I'll see you again. Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Blood DK gameplay. Thank you for sticking with me. We are going to be doing Blackrook Hold, which is really interesting, actually, because I get to demonstrate that boss that will maybe kick my ass, although it has been such a long time. It has been such a long time waiting. It took me nearly 2.5 hours to get this queue. That the healer is actually someone for the community. You might recognize him from the Twitch streams and such, Mr. Valzak, who is a Mythic Raider, so it might actually not be an issue. So, while we wait for someone to get in, we'll get started. Why not? We'll get started and off we go. So, the general gameplay you're going to see here is I'm going to be very, very sort of spam heavy on lots of things, right? So you're going to see things like, oh, hold on 1 moment, so. What is the name of this character? Lomo. So you're going to see me, like, doing loads and loads of things. Now, what you've got to remember, as I tried to explain to you, is a lot of these things are, in fact, filler spells that just do damage. They absolutely do nothing for tanking. So Blood Boil is an example of that. Blood Boil is absolutely instant, just does damage and refreshes my diseases. So you could say it's got some interaction there, sure. But generally speaking, not so much. Now, what I'll do is keep my Bone Shields up, and this will be maybe a highlight the example that Bone Shield just seems to last forever. And a very interesting aspect of this, now I'm just wary that this trash does tend to wreck face sometimes. So I'm very, very, very aware of that. Come here. Is this trash does wreck face? Is that you'll see that my Bone Shield charges how very rarely I'm going to be pressing Marrow Rend. Like, I'll be pressing Heart Strike more often than not because it lasts forever, right? There's nothing this can say about that. It absolutely seems to last absolutely forever. Now, what this creates is a very interesting situation, which hopefully this dungeon is actually going to be quite good at demonstrating. Is that, as a Blood DK, I found a very, very interesting thing that I haven't had with any of the other tanks in Legion so far. And that is, that sometimes you feel absolutely invincible. I mean, genuinely invincible. And other times you feel really squishy. So now we're going to show, this is going to be an example, guys. Actually, I'm really glad we got this dungeon now. No Gorfien's Grasp. How irritating is it already? I can already feel you guys, like, Gorfien's Grasp is still on cooldown from when I used it, like, so long ago. So what I'm going to do is whack on some Bone Shields. Spend those Death Strikes, because I don't particularly need them. So we'll just do that. Death and Decay down. Now, as you can see, these whirlwinds on the floor. Oh, it's not hitting him. That was knocking back. Okay, they've nerfed that mechanic. That's interesting. So this was the prime example of when I first thought to myself, when I first put up the Blood DK, I was like, dude, where the fuck? Where the fuck is my Strangulate? I really want my Strangulate back, like, so badly, because these knocked you all over the room. And it appears that now they absolutely don't. So that's interesting to me that they seem to have gotten rid of that mechanic. I should be interrupting more than I am, but this is the kind of feeling I get when I play my Blood DKs. I feel, that's Blade Storm. Look at that animation. Fucking crazy. They've nerfed the shit out of this dungeon. It seems that way anyway. Anyway, up we go. Come on. This way. Kill it. As we move on to our first boss. Now, is there ads on this boss? There's not ads on this boss. I don't think. Thinking. There are not ads on this boss. No, there are on Heroic. Not here. Okay, so I'm going to take Blood Mirror, Soul Gorge, and Consume Vitality. We're going to try and make use of those. Okay, these are more single target abilities. And show you what your single target spell play is supposed to be like. So there's some movements we got on here. So we'll get our dot going. Now the difference is, and this is a complaint that I think is very justified. You can see we still get the Death and Decay procs. Is that when you play this playstyle, the single target sort of spec they give you is a little bit on the weak side for the reason that you lose Blood Boil as a filler. And that then, like, points out the obvious problem that occurs with this spec is that, oh, once you don't have these sort of false, and they are false, spells to cast, like, I mean, Blood Boil is just like a damage filler. When you don't have that, what you actually have is nothing else to do. And instead your playstyle change, you can see how long Bone Shield charges last here. It's pretty crazy. Okay, suck that off. That should give us 13 stack. 13% regeneration rate. Not ripped. Not bad. Oh, Bladestorm single target. Ballsy! The playstyle really slows down when Blood Boil's taken out of it, and then it kind of comes fucking straight back to life that, oh, this spec actually only realistically has a couple of buttons. It's like, yeah, it does. Sorry, dude. It really does only have 2 buttons. And we're trying to hide that. Essentially, is what they're doing, is they're trying to hide that under the guise that, you've got Blood Boil to press, and you've got all this kind of stuff to press. And you're like, yeah. But at the heart, it is a 2-button spec, isn't it? And you're like, yeah, it is. So I'm going to pop Vampiric Dancing Rune Weapon just for the sake of doing DPS. Woohoo. Use a Consumption. Not Consumption, what's it called? Soul Gorge. Now, what I can fit into this is, of course, Consume Vitality, and this is what it looks like. Unfortunately, there's other things I could be doing here. It would be nice if maybe Consume Vitality works slightly differently. I think a use fit could be something like it starts regenerating all your runes. I mean, the loss of Empower Rune Weapon really is noticeable, as is Army of the Dead. And when you don't have those abilities, I'll show you Blood Mirror, because we're probably not going to use it throughout the remainder of here. There's Blood Mirror. Oh, we probably will use it on the last fight, honestly. Maybe that's it. That's Blood Mirror. Very similar to the... Well, it is the ICC mechanic, so there's no need to talk about that there. Let's put Heart Strike back. Rapid Decomposition. I can't take Bone Storm yet, because my Blood Mirror is on cooldown. Your single target roll, when you're doing like a single boss targeting, that is when the Blood DK really opens the door to say, hang on a minute. Hold the fucking phone just a minute. Yeah, this spec really is actually based off very, very few abilities. And when they take out this spammable, almost spammable Blood Boil, there's a Wraith Walk. Whoa, spooky, spooky. When they take that out of the game, holy shit. Holy shit, do you start to go, oh man, wow, yeah, this is pretty crazy. This is exactly what I thought it was going to be. It does come down to Bone Shield up, and then use Heart Strike, Death Strike, whatever as you go along. And they're Band-Aid fixes. These are Band-Aid fixes, by the way. Come with daddy. Come on, disease has been ticking. Come on, big spider, bro. There you are. Cool. Down you go. This is where I would really like, ordinarily, to drop like a Chains of Ice. Now, my Heart Strike doesn't have the same slowing effect as I was hoping for. See if I can get my healer up here, and then we'll do the big pull. There he is. Cool. This is a little dangerous. For most tanks, this pull is actually really, really dangerous and absolutely not recommended. Now, for the Blood DK, it's fine. Because what you're going to see is a combination of a number of things. Let's get some Bone Shields going. Tremble Before Me is going to do some very crazy sort of levels of CC. Because some of these mobs are really dangerous, and they'll do things like channeled... Oh, I missed out on the stun avoidance. You can move away from that bone-breaking strike. Yeah. You see like this arrow barrage effect over here? What you'll see in a lot of cases is Tremble Before Me will actually stop that being a thing. Come over here. Stay in my glorious AoE. Bonebreaker Strike. Let's move out of the way of that. Don't want to get stunned. I know there are tanks who are watching this going, fuck you, Preacher. Fuck you, Preacher. Why? This trash decimates other tanks. Like, crazy decimates other tanks. And it's kind of funny. Let's move out the arrow barrage. It decimates other tanks, this trash. But with the Blood DK, I've never had an issue with it. Even when... I'm not sure if Tremble Before Me, which is the like the CC, is actually your low on mana. Do you want a drink? Do you want a drink? Because you made a Tauren Priest. Tauren Priest likes to drink the Milky Milkies. You drinking? No? Okay. Oh. Fair enough. Look at that. I was so ballsy then, you know why? You'll see the fear effect just popping up every now and again. Bone Breaking Strike. Let's move out of the way. This trash is super powerful. Now, it has been nerfed on its own, so it's not a big deal. So the other tanks, don't worry about it too much. I don't want to cast this without Crimson Scourge. There we go. Crimson Scourge does make it feel like I will never cast Death and Decay without Crimson Scourge. More stuff. Oh, this is excellent. Look at this. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Just looking out for... Oh, look at this. Look at this dragon. So funny. Knife dance. Knife mensch. So you're definitely taking more than enough notice, I've no doubt, that marrow, rend, and bone shield, even with, you know, a reasonably sized trash pack, ain't no big deal. Come to me, friends. Let us AoE together in this fountain of youth. Nice stun, bro. Let me get mine down. Let's use a dancing rune weapon for the shits and giggles. I don't need it at all, but why not? It's there to be used. We're not going to need it on the boss, no doubt. There's some mitigation things going on the boss, which is very exciting. Tanking in general is a kind of lesser experience than you're going to get in Walls of Draenor. Now, I think that's an important note, because it's not something tied to the Blood DK. The Blood DK is hilariously simple. I think it's hilariously simple, and the loss of rune management and general runic management really is not been beneficial, I don't think. Do your RP. Good. There we go. Come to daddy. Death Ball created. Crimson Scourge. Down you go. There's all your AoE that you're ever going to do. Because, I know, why is it a detriment then? Let me expand on that so it doesn't sound like I'm bitching, as many people like to say when I say anything negative about anything. Because Blood Boil and Death and Decay and all these good things are purely... Stop standing in there. Let me AoE grip everything just to stop them casting. I don't want my friends... What you'll... I'm going to talk about two subjects and I'm overwriting myself. I'm aware of that. So let me sort of finish what I'm talking about here. Look at the group. Okay? Look at the group. This is important to know because you're going to see it a lot. In fact, our man died there. Up, up, up. Up, up, up. What you're going to notice is that the Blood DK, particularly 5-mans, and this ties into the challenge mode discussion I kind of had in the first section of the video, is that you'll find that you do feel utterly invincible in a lot of situations, but your group isn't. And that's really funny to me. It's really funny. I can pull pretty much this entire instance, or at least huge chunks of this instance, without much concern. I can easily cope with what's going to come out in any sort of reasonable pull. I'm not talking something ridiculous, okay? I'm talking about a reasonable pull. I can cope with it without much problem at all. There's the stun. Get out of the way. My group can. And I find that really funny. What a nice dodge I did. And then he got interrupted again. Ha ha ha! Tremble before me. He's going for this stun again. I find that really funny. The splash AoE damage and stuff that's caused. Look at the damage that goes out here. And then look at the damage that I take. It's almost non-existent. And that is actually, and hilariously enough, come here, the limiting factor of your pull for my Blood Deathknight. It's not what happens with my other tanks. Right? If I play a prop pally or anything like that, that's not how I feel. But with the Blood DK, I felt like that since fucking day one of Legion Alpha, is I felt either super invincible or super weak. Now, what we will find is the super weak side, which, unless something's changed, we're going to find that out on the third boss. Not this next boss, we're going to be absolutely fine on the next boss, which is here. Hello! Who's not in elf form, he starts a Demon Hunter now. Interesting. Where he's going to hit really fast and really hard. He's going to chew up my bone shield. And, yeah, that's going to be an interesting thing that goes on there. So we'll see that going on. Now, there's some active mitigation stuff that goes on here. So we're going to collect some runic for it. He's going to debuff me, and then he's going to jump up with, like, a shear. So there's Brutal Glaive. That's going to debuff me. And then he's going to do shear. So we're going to actively mitigate that. Or not, because he leaps in the air and I couldn't death strike. That's funny. Never mind. Got debuffed like a complete noob, but there you go. Must bear in mind that he leaps up there. Vengeful Shear, so there you go. Death Strike it. Up we come. No problem at all. And we're going to build Runic in order to counter that. We have 9 stacks of Bone Shield. We can't mitigate more than we are doing. In fact, he's probably going to leave soon. There's Vengeful Shear. Put that up. And we're fine. See, I don't get the Vengeful Shear debuff. You guys will be familiar with these mechanics. Let's Blood Mirror. Let's Blood Mirror. I didn't change it back to Bone Storm. Now we get to tank some ads. Hello. Come here. I-beams are tracking me. That's interesting. Oh, they've changed now. So I like to tank these next to here. Why? Because that means they can DPS the boss at the same time. Always a good tip if you can do it. And you can see how... There's the stun. Hopefully I'll stun someone else. Let's tank him this way, so it's not a big deal. I'm just going to AMS this I-beam track and then move out a bit now. Still on me? Cool. There we go. Dancing Rune weapon. Are you tracking me again, bro? Come on, man. Really? I'm just going to run backwards and forwards over it to make it as small as possible. Right over where everyone's DPSing. Write my name. This boss is stupid easy anyway. Don't track me again. Yeah, the bone shield mechanic, I'm not a fan of it. I mean, it's not working right now. I wanted it to be a really interesting choice. I wanted it to be a really interesting choice between how fast does the boss hit. These are all things that old school tanks would certainly have considered, which you're not going to consider anymore, unfortunately. And that's just, unfortunately, the way it is. Brutal Glaive, we can Death Strike it anyway, why not? Vengeful Shear, Vengeful Shear, Vengeful Shear. Feel like I'm tanking Illidan again, bros. Who remembers? I'm actually refreshing my, there we go. I'm actually refreshing my bone shields there, purely out of the fact that he's not attacking me. But of course, we did go through a phase where he didn't attack me, so it's not ultra surprising. Although I doubt he would have eaten through 10 anyway. I don't feel any danger at this point, and I think that tipping point between you feel super, super powerful and it almost makes you lazy. You'll see most of the mistakes I make while tanking this right now is because I'm... Honestly, a lot of the buttons I'm pressing don't have anything to do with tanking. For the most part, they just don't. Now, this could be interesting, because these can taggle you up to hit really hard. So we'll do a big pull here. Let's wait for everyone else to catch up. There we go. They finally see me. Let's pull these as well. Let's see if we get something scary going. Okay, so now they're out the shockwave. So now you'll see how quickly these are consuming my bone shield charges. We're up to 8. Brutal Assault. Move away from it. Yeah, 9 stacks still. Here's a Consumption. Consumption has been ultimately nerfed, by the way. If you're not sure what Consumption is. There's some nice mechanics with fire, which you can just move to the side of, as you can see there. Yeah, unfortunately not quite as scary as I was hoping. And this is awkward. It really is awkward, because you don't know when you're going to start getting hammered. Vampiric Blood. Nice big heals. Off we go. No worries. No fears. No dangers. I know some people will panic when they see the health doing that. But you really don't need to. You absolutely don't need to. Death and Decay down. Lot of procs. Just so much stuff to handle that doesn't add to your tanking. It feels very strange. And they're really put in because they came up with this idea that baseline, the Blood Decay is this 2-button spec. And... it will come down to you. I'm not saying I dislike it. I honestly don't feel like I'm pressing that much different to what I would do on a live Blood DK. Right? The things that would concern me from my perspective, you guys have been all like, yeah, you know what? We like the easy perspective. That's cool. I have no problem with that. The things that really make a difference to me are the lack of rune management and planning. I don't plan anything anymore on my Blood Deathknight. My Death and Decay is on a 15-second cooldown and has a free proc. I don't consider it at all. I don't have any different types of runes, so I don't need to add that into my thinking. I basically just watch and see. You see, most of the buttons I'm pressing in. What's the big consideration or thought I'm pressing? Is my bone shield up? Yes, no. That is about it, if I'm being totally honest. And some of you will be absolutely fine with that. Cool. If you are, if you're looking for something with a bit of thinking behind it, you're probably not going to find it with the Blood DK, is what I'll say. And that will come entirely down to you as to whether or not you like that. Now, I will say this Wraithwalk animation is set to change, interestingly enough, and should allow you to do things like jump, which you can't actually do at the moment. So that's something you should bear in mind there. I never ever feel in danger here, even with the lack of Icebound Fortitude. I never ever... Now, I'm hoping to get a big pull going here, but I'm going to wait for people to catch up. Get my Bone Shield back on, because it expired. Yeah, here they are. So I've got diseases on. Let's move up the hill, because these things don't actually do, like, any damage. In fact, again, this is one of those things that entirely comes down to how much damage will it do to your party, rather than the damage it will do to you. And I think that's something that a lot of Blood DKs might get real tired of real quick. Oh, it's targeted me. Excellent. Is that you are so heavily tied to other things dictating how much you can pull. Because your mitigation, for honest, it doesn't matter. Look, I'll just keep going. Honestly, I'm tied to, like, oh, there's Blood Boil, cool. Got Blood Coil. Death and Decay. Big, fat, meaty pull. Come on, catch up, friend. Am I going to be in trouble here? No. I'm still at 9 Bone Shield charges. You'll see how much Tremble Before Me starts proccing as well. You'll see so many things just pop up with a little fear symbol, and that means they're stunned for 3 seconds. Really easy. You see the little fear symbols just popping up. You have no control over it, completely RNG. I'm sure sometimes it'll fuck you. Wraithwalk. Now, here's the guy I'm interested in tanking for you guys live. Well, not live, but the fact that I haven't done this dungeon since the latest build, which was actually this morning. Whether or not this has affected blood DKs in some way. Now, I'm hoping to start this with 10 blood shield charges. 10 bone shield charges, I should say. In order to get a good idea of what's happening here. So there's 10. Ooh, down to 9. Not bad. Not the end of the world. This guy has, historically, on my blood DK, chewed me up. So, hold on. Let's get Soul Gorge. Okay. Here we go. Let's see. Refresh them. Get in there. We've got a nice fat runic, so. 8 charges already. Cool. Now, this boss is based on your mitigation, of which I only can do 20%. Shaking Stomp. Not back. Back in again. Refresh these. Keep these at 10. I might be overpowered here because I consider I can get these 10. So let's Soul Gorge that. Down to 6. You can see this guy. Ooh. Here he goes. So he's got one. He's given me 1 debuff. Okay. Still quite early on in the fight. I've had to use my consumption artifact ability. Let's get some more runic up for some more death strikes. Let's heart strike our life away. See if we can get a nice big death strike. That'll do. Down to 4 bone shield charges now. Now you can see where this starts to occur, right? Oh, I missed out on the consumption, which is poor. You are nicely punished for fucking up consumption. I think that's interesting. Bone shield's looking okay. Not until you use vampiric blood yet. Got blood mirror. Debuff's worn off. Interesting. Debuff's worn off. I don't think I've seen that happen. Let's blood mirror now. Refresh this. Death strike. Got consumption back, so we'll use consumption. That's a 415k heal. Not bad. Down to 2 bone shields here. Put another marrow rend can go alongside that. Normal death strike. Let's heart strike now. We're at 5. Now you might think this looks really interesting. Some of you who are long-term tanks might be like, okay, now I'm starting to see some shit going on. Let's use that. What's it called? This ability, Soul Gorge. We got a nice 13 stack there. I'm happy with a 13 stack. Back up to 9 bone shield charges. We're going to be fine. This boss has been nerfed then. All DKs have been changed in such a way to be able to cope with this. So what I had previously was this boss just chewing through me at some point. And I was out of resources with which to deal with it. And that seems to be all but gone now. But you get the idea of how this spec could play and be interesting. When it pushes you like that and you're really having to make choices. Do I want to heart strike or blood strike here, or do I want to use marrow rend, or what do I want to do here? That's when it starts getting interesting for the blood DK. Outside of that, though, you're too powerful. It feels like these mechanics are just either too simple or not worth doing. Now, we're going to do a big pull here. Hopefully, they're not going to start DPSing too hard until we get several of these, because these actually do, like, nothing. Whoop. Come on, join the party. There you go. That stun's not good. I'm gonna die. Woo! Stunned again. Uh-oh. Oh, wow. That was my bad. Too brave. My bad. Change stunned. Ordinarily, I could do that. I don't know whether they've been changed in some way. I just want to point out there that I have tanked this a lot of times, and that's never really been a problem. But there you go. Sometimes these things happen, and now we have... you can run back from here now. Excellent. Excellente. I want to change some things then. I want this. I want this. We can use Bone Star with the last one. Everything else is fine. Unfortunate that happened. But there you go. As always, overly brave tank dies in dungeon. Everyone can laugh. Ha ha ha. So there's your giggle for now. Everybody back? Bup, bup, bup. Good. Alright, we'll be a little less brave with these then. Historically, for a little historical context there, on this trash in particular, is... For the most part, this trash seemed out of place. I think I even said this, and I could even rescue my name a little bit here. Is that... I found that this dungeon was out of place because this trash did nothing. This trash actually did nothing, and I was like, yeah, Blackrock Hold seems weirdly out of place, so whether or not that's the change they've made to make that happen, potentially. But either way, unless it's never changed, they just haven't been stunned by it before. That's also possible. Bone Storm! So, I thought they renamed this Bloodstorm. You can see it's actually a blood effect that's swirling around me there. Just for the sake of flavour, because it's not the Bone Storm that we thought it was going to be, but Lord Morrigar style. It's nothing like that. Are you going to like this? Is it a fun tank? It would be, you know what would make this really fun? It's adding back in those flavour spells, like Army of the Dead. Was it a big deal that a tank could cast Army of the Dead? In some occasions, it was actually useful. But it's that flavour stuff that... Oh, excuse me. It's that flavour stuff that actually gives the specs their fun quality, those little niche things. And it does feel like a little too much has been removed at this point. And I do feel like I miss those little strangulates or Darth Vader grips, whatever it might be. The stuff that should be the flavour stuff, like Dancing Rune Weapon, just doesn't seem to carry the same balls that I want it to. I mean, part of me wants to say, and I think this is like going to be a case of being... He's being rose-tinted, he's being rose-tinted. I would like the old runes back. I would like the old rune system back. I would like to have blood runes that do certain things, and frost runes that do certain things, and death runes that do certain things. I think that's important. I think that adds more to the flavour of the class than just self-healing, which seems to be where they are with it right now. It's like just self-healing is a thing. I don't think that's enough. You know, self-healing is fine and all, but does it make the class give its flavour? And again, that'll be a different opinions depending on your own personal thoughts. But generally speaking, it's not quite enough for me. I like the idea that it was different charges than that blood, you know, lent most of its abilities towards blood runes. And I could say the same about frost. It's like most of the important stuff comes from frost runes, and that makes sense. And that adds to the flavour of being that spec. The just death runes make it feel like an arbitrary cooldown. Like, instead of just having Heart Strike or whatever have a cooldown, it has some arbitrary cooldown. Now, we are going to change back. 30 seconds till Blood Mirror. At least we're not on Heroic. This boss actually has a random ability that hits you, and sometimes it really hurts. But again, they've just made that third boss easier, so this might not be a big deal. Sometimes I have died to this boss without, like, being able to do anything about it. So, we'll see. Full mana? Okay, let's go. So you'll notice that I get debuffed at some point with something that I don't know is coming. He won't have a cast time. There it is. You see it there? What's it called? Unerring Shear. Yeah, there's not much you can actually do about it. Which is a bummer. Except keep... There it is again. Let's Vampiric Blood that one. I wish I had Blood Mirror. I wish I had Blood Mirror for safety. I would like Icebound Fortitude around now. But I obviously can't do that. Oh, missed out on my... I always forget the name of this ability. Soul Gorge. Oh, tell me when would be nice for that. I hate tracking dots on the target. That's mainly the reason I'm missing it. But hey! Alright, so now we have a rather weird moment for the tank. And the weird moment is this. You don't get the buff from this guy particularly quickly. And sometimes you can get your ass kicked right before you get the buff. This guy gives like a huge, huge buff. And sometimes you just miss out on it. Now we turn into kind of glorified DPS. And this kind of does bring us to the end of the tanking portion of this dungeon. You don't really do much of any tanking here. It just disappears and you'll run in a circle. Yep, so we start here and you go round. Beep. If you stay near the actual outer one, it's just like so much easier. These mind control you, by the way. Don't stand in them. The Blood Decay is okay, although I think when it gets to this, the single target portion of Blood Decay, especially the... a big culprit of this is the talent Soul Gorge. With any form of Tell Me When or whatever, the spec just realizes itself of having not much going on at all. It really doesn't. It's down to a 2-button type spec, and that's really, really not interesting, even after a very short amount of gameplay. And I think I wouldn't be the only one to claim that as a problem. The idea of simply padding out the buttons you press, and I mean simply padding out the buttons you press, by simply giving you 2 abilities of which are free, for all intents and purposes, they're completely free, and saying, well, there's your depth. That's it. You are pressing a lot of buttons, guys. Don't worry about it. I just don't think it pays off as much as I would have liked. I'm on the wrong side of this, and I'm in a mind control thing, so we'll Wraith Walk around it. Whee! There we go. Run away, little girl. Run away. Burn away. Burn away. Burn away. Yeah, 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 yeah. Come on. Are we done yet? Ha! Stun, bro. Nightmare. Move away from that. At least I spawned a nice cloud of hypnosis over there. There's Easy's on. I think there's going to be quite a large amount of players. In terms of frequency of pressing buttons, like I said earlier, frequency of pressing keys, it feels about the same. It feels reasonably fast, except when you use Soul Gorge, because it takes away your ability to fill with Blood Boil, and that's what highlights the initial problems. And Soul Gorge itself could be changed to not replace Blood Boil. And Blood Boil no longer applies diseases. The only reason it replaces Blood Boil is because you're sucking a disease off, and you can't have an ability that, like, gives a disease while sucking a disease off. That makes no sense. So that's the only reason that that exists. Can you laser this bit? Thank you. Burn away, little girl. Can I go through the middle? Look at that. You know what that is, don't you? Years of Yoxeron training. Yeah, some guys will get that for sure. Years of Yoxeron training. Like, exactly how big is this green cloud? I need to know if I'm going to do Yoxeron no lights, because that's going to be really important. The Bone Shield mechanic needs to be way more interesting than this. Like, single target or boss like this, you can see it's just not a thing. It's just not a mechanic, and I should have taken Consume Vitality here. But even then, it's not a thing. Consume Vitality costs 2 runes and basically does a Death Strike, which is... Sure. I guess you can call that a mechanic if you like. But as you can tell, like, bosses like this, it just does nothing. It's not worthwhile. And that's sort of going to be a numbers and tuning thing rather than, like, a mechanical problem, I think. It's a numbers and tuning thing about how that mechanic should work. If they get it right, it'll be fine. If they get it wrong, it'll suck. Overall, there's your Blood DK preview right now. Some people will be, like, more than happy with how this plays. Others who are looking for a more complex style of tanking are not going to be as happy. But that is entirely down to you. The Blood DK, guys. In Legion, that's how it is. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.